Hi, welcome to Tigress on Tuk-tuk, a nature podcast for the Indian urbanite with me, Sarah Mohan. Okay, I'm going to jump right into this episode. There's so much to talk about and so much to set straight. This one is so important and I've explored it from so many angles that it's now turned into a two-part monster episode. The creatures in question have been around for millennia, been villainized for probably just as long, and elicit violent, extreme reactions in most people. Usually not so great reactions. If my overemphasizing all the S words so far and hissing and causing all the sibilance in the audio hasn't given you a clue, I'm talking about slithering, sinuous, tongue-flicking, unblinking snakes. Now, one reason for doing this is because I had a whole load of snaky questions, especially as we've had a few snakes around our garden. My other reason, which we'll get into during the episode, is far more monumental and pertinent. I also put it out there on Instagram and asked many people in my circle what they thought of snakes. And my goodness, so many questions. You'll see these peppered throughout the conversation wherever relevant. So off I went with my questions and a backpack full of recording equipment on a train ride plus a quick car ride to the little village of Ratnapuri, some 40 kilometers from Mysore. My destination, the Liana Forest Farm, home to Gerry Martin, his wife Chandni, their kiddo Rahil, a handful of other humans, a pack of the most boisterous doggies, who, by the way, also briefly feature on this episode, a menagerie of critters, and of course, the star of the hour, snakes. Tanks and boxes and enclosures worth of snakes. Oh, the setting for this episode was just perfect. Gerry and Chandni were so welcoming. They had me over for 3 days, took care of my food and drink, and introduced me to everyone on the farm, the non-humans too. Okay, city slickers, I'm pretty sure you've heard of Gerry Martin. The man needs no introductions, but I'm going to do it anyway because his work is amazing. Also, he hates anything braggy sounding about himself. Haha, too bad, Gerry. Brag I will. Gerry Martin is well known not just in India but all over the world. He is famous for his contributions to herpetology and snake conservation. Even my school kids, part of the nature program that I run, knew all about him when I showed them a picture of him as part of a snake module I was doing. He was the first ever Indian National Geographic adventurer. He's dedicated all his life to understanding snakes better and addressing the human-snake conflict in the most logical, sustainable way possible. At the moment, he's involved in all kinds of things within and outside of the local community at Hunsur: education, outreach, research, extensive collaboration and networking, all going towards making nature conservation a lifestyle for anyone that might cross paths with him. Also, he's always welcoming of anyone who wants to do good work and more than happy to contribute in any way possible, big or small. I know this personally from my time spent with Gerry and his family and his patience at answering my 253.78 questions I've asked both in person and over several emails. We had this conversation in his little office room surrounded by rows and rows of tanks and boxes of snakes. So in this first installment of this two-part series, Gerry takes us through snake biology, snake evolution, why we need snakes, snake phobia, and other aspects and issues just to give us a general context, to set the stage, to whet your appetite, and to get you to rethink everything you think you know about these enigmatic, highly controversial creatures. Here's the ever-patient, never sugarcoating it, always on the go, incredibly inspiring snake man who I admire very much, both for his clear-as-heck pragmatism and his giggle-inducing sarcasm. Gerry Martin.
Yeah, it's actually Gerard Naveen Martin, if you want to go that far.
Wow.
So,
I feel you. I've got 3 names as well. I'm Sarah Divya Mohan. I always thought it was a Malayali South Indian thing. Apparently not.
it's a South Indian thing.
It's a South Indian thing?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so in the time that I've spent hanging out here with you guys and everything that's around here, it looks to me, and it's clear to see that you, every waking moment that you have, you are walking, talking, handling, taking care of, thinking of snakes all of the time. It's snakes on the brain when you're awake. Almost every waking moment looks like. So when you go to sleep at night, do you dream in snake? Do they feature constantly in your dreams?
No.
Oh,
Yeah, they don't. I actually, so the last dreams I had of snakes were quite a long time ago, but I think the most vivid ones always happen when I start working with a new species. So when I first started working professionally many years ago with King Cobras, I had the most vivid King Cobra bite dreams, and I would wake up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat.
oh, nightmares then.
Yeah,
Yikes.
they weren't nightmares until I got bitten. They were awesome until I got bitten. Back in those days, there was a lot of, I guess, ambiguity about snakes, and there was nothing to go back on. So the King Cobra was just this myth to me,
Yeah.
and then suddenly I was, working with 12 of them, and it was just a bit. It was an emotional roller coaster because there were massive highs, and then the fear as well that went with it.
Right, right. So to take it back all to the beginning, would you have like an earliest memory of as a kid of holding a snake or interacting with one?
So the first time I ever held a snake was when I was about 4. I remember holding a snake. I was about 4 at the Ahmedabad Snake Park, a place called Sundarvan, and I very clearly remember this what looked like a clump of dog poop in my hand. It was a red sand boa,
Nice.
and yeah, but I remember being completely smitten by it.
Oh.
Yeah, but my mum and play school teacher tell me that on a previous trip there with the school, I apparently climbed into the pen with the pythons and the keeper and gave my preschool teacher a bit of a heart attack.
Oh.
Yeah.
Snakes. Why did it have to be snakes?
I don't remember that.
Oh, wow. So I guess this is something that was kind of always inherently there. So is that what most of growing up was like? Were you out and about, turning over rocks and flipping over snakes? And
No, I actually had no clue what to do. So I was always very comfortable with all animals, and I loved any animal. So I would very frequently, apparently, come back from playing with goats or cows and had fleas on me or ticks on me. Apparently,
most kids just have lice.
I don't think I've had lice.
Oh,
So yeah, I wasn't with other kids that much, but yeah, but I think as soon as I was I could fathom any of it. There was all the fear that went. There was sort of I was conditioned into. People were terrified of snakes, so that didn't keep me away from them, but it did make me very cautious. So I didn't go around picking up snakes or anything for a few years.
so your family didn't necessarily, I mean, folks and stuff didn't were they like, what is this child? Usually it's all cats, dogs, and parrots, but this one wants snakes. Did they encourage that?
There were two things actually. So my father lost a friend to snakebite, and so it was very difficult for him to even accept any of this stuff. My mum, she's first generation Montessori teacher in the country, so there wasn't much material that she could get, but I had every animal book that we could afford. I had, and so it was I think pretty much that encouragement that enabled me to learn a few things. Most of them are admittedly obsolete now, but so I think what really benefited me is I watched snakes a lot, didn't handle them. I mean, I remember very clearly when I was very young, must have been about 6 or so, and my grandfather and I were walking to the pump house on the farm in Bangalore, and we saw a cobra, and it sort of stopped across the path, and I sort of pulled back because I was really scared of cobras by then because of
It was already in your head.
But my granddad very calmly, he just held me on the shoulder and he said, "Don't worry, it'll go away." And that actually helped me just more than anything else. So I knew that if I didn't go too close or if I didn't trouble them, I'd be safe. And so I was able to, from a very young age, watch all kinds of snake behavior. And I think I learned to be still. And that sort of helped me. And I learned to hear what they were saying, so to speak. So yeah, that I really, even today with interactions with snakes, I try to I try to approach it more empathetically so I understand what they're going through.
Even as a teenager, Gerry kind of saw for himself some sort of reptilian future. And so he landed up at the Madras Croc Bank to work and learn from the legendary Romulus Whittaker. He even did a stint in television working on various famous productions, all with reptiles, of course.
So when I joined ROM in 1995, I sort of landed up as a babe in a cradle sort of thing, and I plonked myself on his doorstep. And the next 4 or 5 years were just a whirlwind of experience. So that was pretty much my college. So I dropped out of school and I still don't have a high school certificate. So, but I learned so much then, and there was just, I think, experiences. There were so many experiences. I mean, the first day that I was there, and I was July 27th, 1995. I'll never forget it.
Wow.
I stopped inside the library, and Rom was walking up, and he said, "Would you like to see crocodiles hatch?" And I said, "Yeah, great." So we went into the nursery, and there was a clutch of Siamese crocodiles hatching.
Wow.
On the very first day that I was there, and I just knew that, okay, this
Sign
is
of
where I
things
need to
to
be.
come. Yeah.
Well, and there were so many of those, I mean, we bred King Cobras the next year. There was like all kinds of breeding of turtles, monitor lizards, and going to all these amazing places. I think I had the very colorful rank of slave. So I got to go everywhere doing slave stuff, which was fantastic.
Right.
So I would move the generator or, get whatever had to be done, drive here, this, that, but get to work with some amazing people, get to go to some amazing places, and pretty much 24/7 learn. So I learned so much in those few years. Television was fun, but I'm not built for it. So I don't think I'll never go back to television.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I achieved less than any other time in my life while I was in television.
At least when you were starting off, I'm sure you had to do a lot more, or perhaps you had to do a lot more tracking and catching. And I think that walking probably was a large part of it, right? Understanding the landscape. And I imagine you did like 40-kilometer walks a day. And how was that, those
Quite
initial
often.
years?
Yeah, I miss them. And the Battle of the Bulge is being lost at the moment. But I think more than the walking is the optimism that you develop with looking for snakes, because they're not easy to find. They're in most places in India, they're very common, but they're not easy to find. But the thing is, you might look under 150 rocks, and it might be the 151st one. So it's sort of this. So if you're looking for a snake, then you really develop that optimism of
I'll
maybe
find
it's
it.
the next, or maybe I won't. But it's just, I think the amount of texture I got to the landscape and other aspects of nature while looking for snakes and other quote unquote creepy crawlies, it really gave me a wonderful. Well, I'd say connect, at least from my side. I felt very connected.
Right. Do you think there was a quality, particularly with snakes, that sort of really drew you to them?
I don't know. I've never been really able to answer this question. But I'm just as drawn to snakes as I am to a beetle or a dragonfly.
Oh, really?
Yeah, or not so much cats and dogs,
Okay.
but wild animals. I'm just as drawn to just about anything. Like crustaceans, for example. I'm just crazy about crustaceans.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I don't know much about them. I just love looking at
Looking
them.
at
And
them.
yeah, so anything that's slightly more enigmatic really appeals to me, and I think I just enjoy the discovery, and that's what I did with snakes. There was so much to discover.
So the whole point of this is to get people to understand, maybe try at least, and understand snakes better. Let's start at the beginning. How long have snakes roamed the planet, really?
Over 150 million years.
Wow.
So very famous titanoboa now. I mean, when I'm doing classes with kids, they invariably say the titanoboa was like so long, and yes, but it's extinct. But yeah, so snakes. So that's the oldest fossil that we have, I think, at the moment.
I see.
About 150 million years.
Okay, a lot of snake evolution is shrouded in mystery, but we do know that they've been around since long before the dinos went extinct. The latest research indicates that the ancestors of modern-day snakes were nocturnal, and they stealth hunted mammals and insects as they slithered about in warm, wet forest ecosystems somewhere in the southern hemisphere. Scientists think that they possessed tiny vestigial hind limbs. They kind of look like tiny frog arms at a snake's tail end. Obviously, they eventually lost these and today are the limbless, cold-blooded carnivores that we know and fear. Oh, and by cold-blooded, I don't mean evil or murderous. Just that their body temperature varies along with the external environment, so unlike warm-blooded creatures like you and I, it is constant work for them to keep their body functional and at the right temperature.
So is today's modern snake, like other boas from today, vastly different to what was back then? Like were there like mammoth giant snakes roaming the primeval forests?
Much bigger than what we have today. Yeah.
I see.
So in fact, today's snakes lengths. It's really interesting about snake lengths, and I think a lot of it has to do with. Can I say it?
Yeah,
the male approach to working with snakes. So lengths are seriously exaggerated.
I just want my ding-dong to look bigger than what is really there.
I mean, people will regularly talk about snakes that are over 35 and 40 feet.
Oh, sexy.
Yeah, but the record for the longest known snake was a reticulated python that was apparently 33 feet. But in World War I think, is when it was destroyed in the museum. And since then, there's been a reward out that is now, I think, something like 500,000 pounds.
What?
Yeah.
What? Oh.
Yeah, for any snake that is 30 feet or more. And so in over 100 years, no one has been able to claim this reward. Oh, wow. So I'd say quite safely that, there's not many of them left.
Right.
So even things like King Cobras, people regularly talk about, this King Cobra was over 20 feet. Well, no, even the longest ever recorded one was 18 and a half feet or so, right? So it's, and the ones that you generally see are about, at least in South India, about 12 feet or so.
Oh.
So, yeah.
Okay, yeah, this battle of the longest snake will probably never be won. There are several claims and records on the internet, plus are you looking at snakes in captivity or those found in the wild? Captive animals tend to be longer, stronger, live longer, etc. In the show notes, I've linked a Wikipedia page with a tabular column of apparently some of the longest snakes reported, if you're interested. The only conclusion you can make is that it's always been the constrictors, boas, pythons, and anacondas, that have been in the running for this title.
But in like normal human terms, do you think there's with particular snake species, is there a seasonality to it? Do they not want to come out like when it's raining, or is there a time of day aspect?
Well, it's everything really. There's diurnal snakes, there's nocturnal snakes, there's crepuscular snakes, which will be active during the twilight times.
Crepuscular.
There's the snakes that like water, there's the snakes that like it dry, there's snakes that like rain, there's snakes that like sun.
So everywhere, anywhere.
Yeah, so it's different. And it's the same snake that, the same species that also acts differently at different times. So for example, Russell's vipers during the breeding season, we've seen males travel in the heat of midday, in October and November, but it's really, really hot. And then females, shortly after they've birthed in April and May, will start moving away from where they've birthed quite immediately. And during the breeding season, males will go from where they stay, which is a really, really small range, to just moving looking for females, and then they go back to their ranges. So there's it depends on what time of year it is. It depends on what the snake's needs are.
Right.
And of course, all the environmental mental parameters. So,
right.
Yeah, it's a tough one to answer, and you can't answer it as snakes do this.
Today, snakes are so diverse. You find them in all kinds of habitats: land, water, trees, underground, daytime, nighttime, extreme temperatures. There are very few places in the world snakes haven't bothered slithering over to. Snakes have done spectacularly well for themselves. Only problem? Their relationship with us.
The snakes have had a really, really raw deal when it uh, comes to their platform with people. I mean, historically, they've just been seen as either evil or
Yeah.
supernatural, or and the truth is, they're just animals that want to go around doing their own thing. Some of them have really spectacular natural histories and behaviors. Some of them, have incredible adaptations. But all we see is snake. Yeah.
Are there any snakes like most people talk about dangerous, longest, fastest, whatever? But do you think there are snakes who are just beautiful or underdogs or just complete like hilarious downright? Any snakes like that?
Yeah. The most incredible snake that, in my opinion, is called the spider-tailed viper.
The Iranian spider-tailed viper.
And it's got a tail that looks like a spider.
Wow.
And it uses it to lure a bird called the spider catcher.
Okay.
And everyone should Google it. It's just amazing.
Wow.
And the way it moves the tail as well, it looks like a spider or a bug moving. So that's the most incredible snake. I mean, there are also snakes that fly, which is ridiculous.
Okay.
Gliding snakes. And studies have shown that they can actually turn mid-flight. So, I mean, just think about a cylinder that can glide. That's Chase.
Hold on. Cheers.
Hang on.
Here's Chase and the rest of the dog orchestra with their 5-part harmony.
This is perfect.
Sound nightmares.
Yeah.
I have 5 of them. Anyway, so there's absolutely stunning snakes that defy nature in how they look. Eyelash vipers.
Wow. Really?
yeah.
Eyelash viper.
Well, they've got this little protrusion there.
Oh, the eyelash viper has my heart. It is a tree-dwelling pit viper found in South and Central America. The eyelashes are not the result of a mascara wand, but are actually rough scales sticking out over the eyes and are thought to aid in camouflage, breaking up the snake's outline as it hangs out in trees, waiting for potential prey to fly past.
And then there's also, I mean, these giant snakes. I mean, anacondas, reticulated pythons. They just don't. You look at them and they shouldn't exist, but they do, and they're just stunning. And then you have the snake with the perception of a king cobra that's just so amazing. There's all kinds of the snakes that see in the infrared spectrum, and they can see heat.
Are those
to
the pit vipers?
Pit vipers, yeah.
Right.
Pit vipers and many boas and pythons as well have them. So you can, some pit vipers can actually see the difference of 0.02 degrees centigrade.
Wow.
That's military grade stuff,
Yeah.
And it's really, really amazing. The snakes that live just below the snow line in the Himalayas. I mean, so the Himalayan pit viper, very short activity, only when there's a little ray of sun. The snakes that live in the sea full time, with just the shortest, time of just giving them a chance, they will blow your mind. They're just amazing animals.
Yeah. Rose, who's 10 years old, and Abhinav, who's a grown-up, they both have 2 questions. I mean, she has 2 questions, but he shares this one with her in that, do they have ears? And Rose also wanted to know, how are they even slithering?
So they do have ears, but they're just not open to the outside. Okay. So they have an eardrum like we do, and it's attached to their lower jaw like ours.
Okay.
So vibrations, they can sense vibrations, but they can't hear my voice, for example, fortunately for them.
Can you hear me? It's just, I've never talked to a snake before.
So they do hear vibrations and low frequency sounds. So many of them will actually keep their heads, their lower jaws planted on the ground, and that will enable them to sense vibrations. How do they slither? They have a series of overlapping scales on their bellies. They're called ventral scales. And they have muscles attached to the sides of those scales. And they sort of push the snake forward. I wish you could see my hands because that's the easiest way to describe it. But they move in waves, and the scales sort of just push the snake forward.
Right. Okay. So what is the snake's experience of the world then? So they can hear, but not in quite the way that we can, and they can see well? Or
So different snakes. So again, there are some snakes that can see incredibly well. A bronzeback tree snake, for example, is very visual in its relationship with the world.
Right.
But a worm snake can just about see light and dark. So different snakes have different relationships as far as light goes.
Do snakes communicate with each other? Do they like hanging out?
No social snakes as far as we know, but they do communicate with each other pheromonally. So they use a chemical communication, especially during the breeding season. If you can call combat communication, males will combat with each other. Some species, males will combat with each other during the breeding season as well for the right to mate.
Right. So in India, how many snakes are we talking about? How many species do we have?
Well, it's growing fast. It's over 330 now, I think. Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and it's growing very fast. The number of species that are being described. So a few things are happening. There are new species that are being discovered,
Right.
actual new species. But there's also a lot of, what they call cryptic species, where species look similar to each other. But if you look at them phylogenetically, they're not.
Right.
So
They're actually different.
yeah, so a lot of that is happening as well. And I dare say that in the next decade or so, we'll be closer to 400.
Wow.
I know what you're thinking. How many of those are venomous, or do we say poisonous?
Well, poison includes any toxin that you can ingest, breathe in, imbibe through your skin, anything. Venom is a protein that needs to be injected into the bloodstream and tissue for it to take effect.
Okay.
So yeah, it's slightly different. But I think a lot of people get caught up in the semantics and
Right.
vocabulary of it, but it doesn't really matter.
Samya wants to know, are there thumb rules to ask if a snake is venomous or not?
Well, if you're in England, yes, because they have 3.5 snakes. And I say half snakes because one is borrowed. It's come over from Europe.
Oh.
And like the English cricket team, they'll take anyone. So the only venomous snake there has elliptical pupils. So they've got that rule. In India, you can't. You have to know what species it is, or at least which group it belongs to know whether it's venomous or not.
Right. And there's no, some people have said V-shaped head, something. No, doesn't work.
None of those things
right,
work.
Just right.
Okay, so whatever the internet tells you about being able to distinguish between venomous and non-venomous snakes, it does not apply to India. I'll say this in different ways throughout the episode, but best you get yourself acquainted with what snakes might be around based on where you live, and more importantly, how to behave around them. Well, that Gerry will tell you. It's very simple. Now, most snakes have teeth. Even the constrictors like our pythons or the anacondas of South America. They help to catch hold of prey to different degrees based on what the snake eats. But only venomous snakes have fangs, and not all venomous snakes have venom that affects humans.
So Deepak wants to know, what snakes have the longest fangs, and what are fangs even? Are they teeth? And
Fangs are modified teeth that deliver venom.
what venom is just something that they produce, right? Like
Yes,
some of the snakes.
in a gland, like our saliva.
Okay.
Like a saliva gland, they have a gland that produces venom. Based on their position, there are 3 different kinds of fangs. So there's front hinged fangs of the vipers.
Okay.
There's front fixed fangs like the cobras, kraits, mambas, coral snakes. And then there's rear fangs like the vine snakes, boom slangs. So the best venom delivery apparatus is the front hinged fangs. And they're hinged because they're very long and they need to fit into the mouth.
So they sort of fold back in.
Yeah. And the longest ones belong to the gaboon viper, 2 inches.
Where do you find the gaboon vipers?
Africa.
Ooh,
Africa.
nice.
Yeah, it's a really, really beautiful snake.
Okay.
So there's a lot of venomous snakes that can't do anything to us, like your checkered keelback water snake, your vine snake. They are venomous, and the venom works on their prey. and it doesn't affect us at all. Okay.
So all snakes have venom?
No. In India, at least, the earth boas, the sand boas, the pythons, none of them are venomous.
Right.
Many of the colubrids, so the what we call non-venomous species, there are some that are rear-fanged, so they have venom.
Okay.
There are some that don't. So wolf snakes don't have venom, but vine snakes do.
So how do they get what they want to eat? How do they catch their prey?
Well, wolf snakes mostly feed on geckos, and that's believed to be one of the reasons they have their enlarged teeth in front, because it helps them grab onto what is otherwise a very difficult piece of prey to hold on to. And but I've also seen wolf snakes swallow geckos alive.
Oh, wow.
And it's really funny because you see the snake moving along, and then the gecko wriggle inside it.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's yeah. So different snakes, they use constriction. They use so there are some species that will actually chase say a mouse down a burrow, grab it, and then push it against the burrow walls to kill it. So there's all kinds of different things that they use to kill their prey. Yeah, but the venomous snakes, so these vine snakes and stuff, can't harm us at all.
I see.
Unfortunately, people call them, mildly venomous. I guess they call it a mild venom, but that's not exactly accurate, because the venom, it's not that it's less strong or whatever. It's about it's relativity, So it's if you were a frog or a lizard, that's really, really strong. That venom is targeting your biology, right? So it's very strong. Also, saying mildly venomous is like saying mildly pregnant. So yeah, it's so you're either venomous or not.
And which of these snakes should we be worried about?
The truth is, we don't have to worry about any snakes. We don't. But people who are working in rural India in agricultural landscapes, or in people who are working with their hands a lot in places that have snakes,
Right.
they need to be worried about it and need to be cautious. The thing is, avoiding snakebite is a lot easier than avoiding getting run over by a car. All right, but for some strange reason, we're not so worried about running blind across a road, but we're terrified about snakes, even the thought of snakes around us.
I mean, I've heard people say the big four, and I've seen that messaging, which I think is important, right? So people at least know.
Yes and no. So the big four had its time,
I see.
but over the last maybe decade and a half, we found that there's many other snakes that are also medically significant.
The spectacled cobra, the common crate, the Russell's viper, and the saw-scaled viper. These are the big four. We've given them this grandiose title because most snake bites that have been reported from mainland India are caused by one of these guys, hence the term medically significant. But this is changing as people encounter other species. Okay, so this brings me to the other reason I had for doing this episode. We will get into it in depth in part 2, the problem of snakebite. It is estimated that India accounts for more than half the snake bites recorded worldwide, averaging at about 50,000 cases a year. Yeah, that is a scary as hell statistic. But you've also got to know that the real problem is the complete lack of education, awareness, and access to medical facilities for those who encounter snakes on a day-to-day basis. Mostly, you and I city folk don't fall under that category. Okay, don't think I'm just saying that because I'm Team Snake, and anyone who's had a traumatic snake experience, you have my full empathy. But this episode and its sequel is to help you see that while some of these snakes are dangerous, snakebite can be avoided altogether, and snakes and humans can and should coexist.
So you can be dangerously venomous. The snake could be dangerously venomous. And there are a lot of those that are, for example, the King Cobra or sea snakes, they can all, they have venom that could kill us, quite easily, in fact. But they're not medically significant because there's no bites. King Cobras hardly ever bite anyone. I mean, the numbers are going up now because of everyone trying to kiss King Cobras.
Right. God.
Yeah, but that should be a separate line item somewhere.
Line item coming right up. And I don't mean any disrespect for religious beliefs that people may have, but this is just really frustrating and stupid and once again reflects so poorly on our species. On the internet, you will find a host of videos of people who claim to have some kind of bond or skill or are brave enough to kiss the hood of a king cobra.
Now, although I would have kissed this cobra over 6 times, that first time was something that I'll truly never forget.
Oh my god, he just kissed the snake.
And
What's with the kissing hoods thing? Why what's that?
I think that we somehow feel that it proves that we're brave. And this whole misconception of, a man having to be brave or able to do this. And it actually is not difficult to do at all. Again, because the snake doesn't want to bite us. It just sits there and says, stop, 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 go away, go away, go away. And then in that time, you kiss it.
Consent, people.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah.
Some even claim to do it because of their love for reptiles. Honestly, it's downright awful. If you watch these videos, you'll see this poor snake just sitting there. I know I have an overactive imagination, but I swear, the snakes, it's just cringing. And why wouldn't it? Some of these guys are like full-on open-mouthed sucking face. Ugh, I felt violated watching perhaps the most intelligent snake in the world being subject to this when it could, in the blink of an eye, put an end to it.
A king cobra is it's a very impressive snake. Not so much because of how everyone sees it as, this massive venomous snake that eats other venomous snakes and could be so dangerous. But I think its intelligence, it's so perceptive. You can actually work with many snakes. You can very easily work with a king cobra.
I see.
And unfortunately, most people work on them.
Right.
And, they try to capture them, subdue them, those kind of things. But and king cobras you'll see how perceptive they are. You'll see how unwilling they are to fight. They want to get away. They want to be left alone. When you watch a king cobra or a cobra or any other snake want to bite something, its prey, there is not a human on this planet that could get out of the way if it wanted to. The only reason we can actually work with these snakes and quote unquote handle them is because they don't want to bite us.
So
And yeah,
not even the last thing really sometimes that they want to do.
yeah, they just
So here's the question that I'm sure most people are thinking, especially after hearing all about Venom and how it can act. Why in the heck do we need snakes? What would happen if we were to, if we didn't want to be violent enough and decimate them, kill them all off? What if we bundle them up into a rocket and fired them up into outer space? And what would we be losing?
a few things. Snakes are a very, very important control of many what would otherwise be pests. So there's the standard argument of rodents, which is true, and we talk about the actual economic cost of having a surfeit of rodents. At present, we lose 1 in 3 fields. About 30% of our agricultural produce is lost to rodents. But we're not even taking into account the diseases spread by rodents. And of course, there's rabies, plague, and all the ones that we know. But there's also leptospirosis,
Right.
toxoplasmosis, tons of other things that we would really reel from. And even things like food security would be, we'd lose all our food
I see.
without those controls.
So snakes really just want to eat mice most of the time.
Well, some of them do. Others want to eat frogs or whatever. But whatever it is, if they're gone, the control will be lost. And we don't have the wherewithal to deal with that. And it will mean the extinction of our species and of life as it is in the world now. So everything will change.
Yeah, and we don't even realize it. So what is it with snakes and people? Why are we so freaking afraid of them? And personally, given my background and how I was raised, I'd say the Garden of Eden story from the Bible really screwed up snakes for most people in my family, I think. And it's such a PR nightmare for snakes, if you ask me.
Yeah.
But then if you look at, on the other hand, if you look at other Southeast Asian traditions and belief systems, snakes are worshipped. But I still think it all comes from a place of fear. And what is that? Is that biological, or are we sort of develop that as we grow up, or
So
what is going on?
There's both schools of thought that it's genetic, And monkeys, for example, would be very scared of snakes, even from birth, pretty much. But if you think about it, um, if an elephant kills you, it's very obvious how the elephant killed you, right? But if you think about, a few millennia ago, when a small, foot-long animal gave you, a splinter-sized cut, and you died, how would you explain something like that, right? So it must be supernatural.
Right.
So, and it's killing you, so it must be evil, and hence, I mean, everything else, I guess, probably, like so many things that we couldn't, that we really couldn't explain, it just snowballed. I guess the big thing that didn't happen earlier is that Western cultures didn't have a big problem with snakes, like the European continental folks, but the others did, and they had very different relationship with snakes. So if you see in South America, in North America, but with with quote unquote Native Americans,
Right.
the Americans, if I may say so,
Yeah.
and get a little political. But here in India, Southeast Asia, Aborigines in Australia, wonderful relationship
Yeah.
with snakes. And I think what changed was when, through colonization, through that, the dread of the snakes really, there was fear, yes, but there was also reverence. And but then with colonization and this whole thing of, if it's dangerous, just get rid of it type of thing, that changed things tremendously.
Right.
Despite being dangerous, snakes have been regarded as symbols of power, prosperity, divine protection, rebirth, and fertility in cultures across the world: Chinese, Native American, Indian, Egyptian. For example, the famous rainbow serpent of Aboriginal Australia is believed to be an immortal being, protector of land and people. Colonialism has screwed over various creatures as and when convenient. Not just snakes, but bats, vultures, wolves. They've all been vilified and subject to atrocities thanks to Western propaganda.
So there was all of this experience and, different things that you did, and all of that finally came to this point in this little village and town, and you decided to build something from scratch over here, and that's how the Gerry Martin project was born?
No, it was born because a friend of mine is really good at branding. And so he sort of brought everything that I was doing under one umbrella.
Which is what? Can
The
you
Gerry
tell us
Martin
a
project.
little
So,
bit more?
I was doing a lot of education, outreach, training, some consultancies, and a little bit of conservation here and there, but as an individual. And so he sat me down one day and said, listen, you're doing a lot of work and you're having a very low impact. So why don't you just make this
A nice little umbrella.
a little more structured. And so personally, I didn't quite like the name, and I apologized for it every time I said it. But I'm just not used to that. I'm not built for it. So, but it did work, and so we pioneered a lot of stuff. I mean, we did the first herpetology workshops, training, first naturalist camps, a lot of those things. It was just very. It was lovely and new. But it sort of always depended on me, which is what has never really sat well, because I would rather just be cooking or fishing or gardening, in fact. So since then it's evolved into the Lion Trust now, which is hopefully going to be much more than me, and eventually I want to I want my role in it to be very, very small. It stems from us wanting to, as fluffy as it sounds, to live in a better space, and we want for wild animals to be calm and enjoy the space around us, while we also want to grow stuff and have our own produce, and we want the community around us to also think like that. So it's just a lot more peaceful and pleasant, and everyone can be happier and secure. So what we're trying to do now is to work with this community, which, thanks to the fact that we're in India, is about 6,000 families.
Okay.
So yeah, So we're looking at all kinds of alternate livelihoods. We've already begun much of our work that got pretty much derailed during COVID with the schools here, where we've set up libraries, and we used to run workshops for the kids every weekend, and everything ranging from plastics and water management to snakebite and book writing, all those kind of things. So. And we're also working now, hopefully with a couple of other organizations who are keen on coming on board to change perspectives completely, but based on something that's viable. You can never expect, and I don't think it's even right to expect people who are struggling to put meals on the table to do something noble, right? And that's the demand that we have at the moment on them. So we're like, listen, it might be tough for you, but you need to just endure those elephants. Or it might be tough for you, but you shouldn't kill that snake, right? But what we want to do is to make it so that it's worthwhile for them to have those animals around. And it's a better life, tangibly, for them when those animals are around. And it takes a lot of work and hand-holding. And we really need to develop new channels and avenues for them to actually be able to benefit from this. So that's something that we're working on very hard and concertedly. But at the moment, our biggest work involves understanding the dynamics of snakebite, because everyone knows what the people were doing when they got bitten. They all know, who got bitten. We don't know what the snakes were doing at that time. We don't know
Jack's squat.
Yeah.
You know nothing, Jon Snow.
There's so much to learn, and I think that needs to be the pivot around which we work with these snakes. We really don't know, and despite that, there's very little humility when we work with snakes.
More on all the incredible research that Gerry is involved in on the next episode. I know I keep saying that. For now, here are a couple of big reveals.
Yeah, testosterone does strange things.
Why is that? Well, you said that earlier as well.
Yeah.
Why is it so male-driven?
So personally, I think that women handle snakes much better than men.
Really?
Yeah.
Girls, we run this mother.
So in fact, both Marina and Dhwani, who are working here,
I noticed
both handle snakes.
a lot of women
and they go
around
out
here,
and do
yeah.
the rescues and all that stuff. And basically, there's no garbage that goes along with them. It's people call it baggage. I call it garbage because it really is that. I mean, it's a snake. You're going there and calling yourself a rescuer. What you really need to do is rescue the snake, and by definition, it means save it, right? But what we do invariably is move it to someplace else. And even rescuers who know that relocation kills snakes continue to relocate them.
What?
yeah.
I've heard people call helplines and then they're like, okay, at least we didn't kill it.
Well, you did kill it. It's just that now you don't have the accountability for it. So rescuers keep saying, no, if we didn't move it, then the people would kill it. And I flatly disagree with that.
Really?
Because I've had success. They don't even try, right? I've had success convincing people to release cobras just outside their houses, crates from behind the television to outside in the gutter, that kind of stuff. And certainly non-venomous snakes, yeah, they're very high. They're not just here where folks know me, even in completely random places that
Really?
I've been, yeah.
So there you go. Relocating a snake to some faraway place from where you found it is not the solution. Neither is killing it. Yep, I hear you. I hear the questions and the scoffing, but this is what the research is saying, and we are only just beginning to unravel all of it. I'm going to be wicked and leave you hanging until next time, but I promise you it will make sense when I've laid out all the pieces of this serpentine jigsaw puzzle.
Most people had talked about situations that they either have faced or they imagined that they could, when they encounter a snake. And it's all, the main question is, what do you do when you see a snake? So Deepika says, cobra, especially when it's flared its hood, it's feeling threatened. What do you do? Dharani says, what do you do when you see a snake?
Well, generally, if you see a snake, it shouldn't feel threatened to start with. It should just move. That's not the first reaction that a snake has.
Okay.
Their first reaction is either to hide or to flee. just continue with what you're doing. Leave it
carry
alone.
on.
Yeah. If you're 8 or 10 feet from it, you're safe. If it's inside a house or something,
Yeah, Geetu's got that question. So snakes, she lives in Kerala, she says, and she's got her parents kill snakes that come in the house, but that's not a good idea. Sudeep Reddy said him and his dogs were outside, went after something in the bushes. It was turned out to be a pit viper. One of the dogs got bitten. Fortunately, it was all right. Soundarya Srinivasan, who did a lot of work in the film industry, she was an associate director. They were on shoot in a forest, and the snake sort of, poor thing, unfortunately came onto their set. And before anybody could even do anything, people decided that it had to go and kill the thing. So what happens when it's like that? You're kind of in a closed space, or it's a surprise encounter, and you lift a box and it's right there. What's the best thing to do?
for one thing, it's really good to know your snakes. So figure out if you can identify these snakes.
Right.
And and there's a lot of material out there that you can get. And I think everyone should download an app called that you can get from indiansnakes.org.
Okay.
It's a brilliant app, and it gives you everything you need to know, from rescuers near you to what to do in case of a snake bite, to help with identifying the snakes around you. And you can also filter by location, so it'll tell you what snakes are there. But aside from that, I think it's really important to introspect about our perspectives to start with. It's really not that dangerous to have a snake around, especially one you've seen. So you've seen it, you keep your eye on it, you call someone and say, listen, can you come and move this snake outside my house? And it's not like you see a snake in your house or on your film set every day, right? It happens occasionally. So moving it out, don't take it away from the location. Take it out of the situation. And quite often the situation is not dangerous either. So if it's just a rat snake, just stomp your feet and it'll move. I think being calm and sensible is really important. With dogs, as someone mentioned, if dogs are chasing and capturing snakes, it's a law of averages, and it's a matter of time before they actually get bitten by a snake that will kill them. So you want to train your dogs. It's really, really important to stay away from snakes.
You've got a whole pack here. What do you do with them?
Oh, they're scared shitless of snakes.
Really?
Yeah.
Is that something you did?
Yes and no. So basically, Jack is scared of everything. So snakes rule the roost on that front. But what I do with all our dogs as pups is I get a piece of shed snake skin. I just leave it down, and every time they go over to smell it, I scare the life out of them.
Wow.
And it works. And the other thing that works really well, with, I guess most people can't do it, is to get a checkered keelback. And when they're really, really small as pups,
Right.
let them sniff it and give them a good chomp on the nose. And
Puppies.
but it saves them.
Right.
Yeah. So especially dogs on a farm. So it's not something that I'd like to leave to chance. Train your dogs.
Worst case scenario, is there something as first aid in the unfortunate situation that someone's gotten bitten? Is there something that you must do as first aid, or is it just
Yes.
straight to the hospital?
Well, it's you don't do first aid while compromising the time that you would take to get to the hospital. So the most important thing is to get to the hospital as soon as possible. But if someone's bitten by a snake of any sort and you don't know what it is, or if you know that it's a venomous snake, the first thing to do is to calm the person down and take charge of the situation. And then you remove any constraining item, watches, rings, friendship bands, anything that might get tight, the wrist cuff buttons of a long sleeve shirt.
Okay.
And anything that might get tight and restrictive. And if you have like a dupatta or a towel or something handy, and if the bite is on the hand, then you create a sling and and immobilize the arm. If it's on the leg, just try and make sure that if you can carry the person, great.
Okay.
If you can't, just support them so that they don't have to put weight on that leg, and keep the side of the bite lower than the heart and get to hospital. That's
all
it.
right. Got it.
So don't try and suck out the venom. Yeah? John Wayne was full of garbage. You can't suck out the venom. It causes more damage. Don't try and tie something tight. it causes more damage.
I see.
Don't burn it. Don't go to quacks.
Mm-hmm.
You might feel like a drink. Don't have any alcohol or coffee or tea or anything stimulating.
Okay.
Not even Coke.
Ooh, okay. Good to know. Okay, this one's, I just wanted to read it because it's hilarious. It's from Bharat Sundaresan, who lives in Australia. And he says, where does Googling what to do in case you encounter an eastern brown snake in the Australian bush, while actually encountering an eastern brown snake in the Australian bush, count amongst the least safest ideas when in the company of a snake? He apparently had this while he was faced with a not very happy snake. This is what he did. Do you think it saved his life? Because he just stood there.
Googled?
Yeah.
Yeah. Just not doing anything is the best thing to do.
Yeah.
And eastern brown snakes are also not as dangerous as they make them out to be.
Mm-hmm.
There's no snake that's really that dangerous. There isn't a single venomous species that will pull the first punch, right? So, or throw the first punch, sorry. But because they can't eat us.
Right.
And there's no reason for them to. So if they see you as a threat and that they can't escape, then it might be a problem. But if they can escape, they'll just get going.
Okay, so snake indoors, watch it like a hawk from a safe distance and call for an expert to come help take it out. Not watchman Anna, not driver Anna, surely not yourself. Snake outdoors, you stay still, leave it the heck alone, and it will go away. As for selfies with a snake,
I already know the answer, but I had to ask you this. Snakes don't harm anyone unless disturbed or harmed, right? So if that is so, can we take a selfie with them?
Okay. Please don't take selfies with any animals aside from your dog and ask your dog's permission. They need to be left alone. Don't take selfies with snakes or any other wild animal for that matter.
Right.
Yeah.
Soundarya's question was very intriguing because I had no idea about this. She says how she's traveled to Southeast Asia and she's seen snake wine.
Yeah.
What is that?
It's basically some wine with a snake put in the bottle.
Oh, what? Why? I mean, what does that do? I thought they infused it with snake venom or did something like how people have a thing about pufferfish and things like that, right?
No, it's I think just a sales gimmick and yeah.
Interesting.
It's not traditional or anything. It's just that they put it in wine. And
Are there any other crazy delicacies like that that you've heard of?
With snakes?
Yeah.
There's this whole thing about snake venom being used to get high.
Okay.
But I don't see how that's possible because I really don't see people titering the amount of venom that they put into a syringe that is then injected into you, which you'd have to do,
right?
Because otherwise you just die. And apparently people just say that they take the snake and it bites you on the tongue. Well, then everyone would die if there was a venomous snake. If it's a non-venomous snake, sucker. But poor snake. I mean, at the end of the day.
God, how horrible.
Yeah, it's just really stupid stuff.
Yeah.
And it basically shows. I mean, it tells. The only thing it tells is on us. As a species, how crap we are.
Right.
So.
when it comes to snakes, we be so Jon Snow. We know nothing. We act blindly based on our emotions and half-baked knowledge, and what's sad about that is not just that snakes end up dead, but we very stupidly put ourselves in harm's way. Gerry says that even when we talk about snakes, there's this undertone, actually it's very in your face, of disrespect, disgust, complete contempt, for whatever reasons, but it's just so unnecessary and makes us do stupid things.
It's really funny because when you speak about something like birds, for example, right? And you don't just say birds, you say a crow or a sparrow or a pigeon. But almost invariably, when people talk about snakes, they talk about snakes.
Snakes.
Yeah. So if someone's complaining about a bird in their apartment block, they'll say, these pigeons are shitting all over my balcony.
Yeah.
Or that, those owls are so noisy, or those kind of things. Where with snakes is, there's snakes.
I hate snakes, Chuck! I hate them!
But I think there's a lot of gray area in our working with snakes and our relationships with snakes as well.
But I must ask, and it doesn't sound like you were at all, but were you ever petrified about this whole snaky experience? You don't look like you were ever shitting bricks around snakes.
So, it's funny that people always ask these kind of questions when we talk about snakes. What was your most dangerous encounter?
Right.
When were you scared? But no one, if you drive from Bangalore to Mysore, no one says, hey, at which point were you most scared? But statistically and functionally, that's a lot more dangerous thing to do than handle a snake.
Yeah.
Driving on a highway in India, or many places for that matter. So it's primarily the stigmas. There have been some close calls, but every cab driver has close calls, and kindergarten school teachers have close calls.
I googled a list of the most dangerous things in the world. There are a couple of variants. But snakes don't feature in the top 5. Who gets first place on every list? Humans.
So it's there have been times when I've been a bit nervous. I've been bitten a couple of times, and both times, you don't exactly feel comfortable.
In case you're wondering, first time it was by a spectacled cobra and then a meadow viper. Both times he said it's because he did something stupid.
But I think I was fortunate enough to have psyched myself into knowing that would happen at some point, and then just switch into task at hand.
Right.
So, but I think post that, thinking back, is when it becomes like, oh, that could have gone
really
terribly
badly,
wrong.
very quickly.
So, but I think being critical of every mess up has helped improve things as well and improve me.
Right.
Okay. I know there's been a lot of controversial things we've said on this episode, like snakes are not the devil's offspring, they are not out to get you, don't kill snakes, or don't relocate them to very far away places. And I haven't even given you all of the information. Don't worry. Next time, we're going to go into all the details of the mind-blowing, mind-boggling research that Gerry and others are doing. There is a committed collective effort to address the issue of snakebite, and a large part of that involves understanding snake behavior. So I'm going to meet folks from the Irula community, go out with them chasing after wild snakes. You'll tag along, of course. I'll be out and about with Gerry while he does some hands-on snaky stuff, get into the psyche of the Big Four a bit, and speak to yet another snake expert who is part of the Snake Conservation and Snakebite Mitigation Project. For now, just have an open mind. Go against everything you believe in or have been taught to believe about snakes. Don't take it from me, but from all these people who've spent all their lives watching, handling, studying snakes. Surely, we don't know better than them. You can follow Gerry's work on Instagram at Gerry_TGMP and also at the Liana Trust. You can follow the show on Twitter and Instagram at Tigress on Tuk-tuk. Also, please do leave a review if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or subscribe to the show on Spotify. You probably already have. Thank you. But do get others you know to do this too. This Christmas, give your loved ones the gift of Tigress on Tuk-tuk. Show's artwork by Gemma Jose, original title track by Prithvi Chandrasekhar. I'll be back in 2 weeks' time with the rest of the story. Enjoy the festivities, be kind, be tolerant both of snakes and sneaky relatives. Drink lots of wine, not snake wine. Stay chipper. Bye-bye.